Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development and your host of Sales and Cigars. Today we have a fun episode with Brent Keltner. His company is Winalytics, and Brent's got a interesting background. He comes from academia and doing research, and he's able to apply some of those recognition of patterns and applying that to sales. He had a successful sales career, and he started his consultancy. So we have a conversation about how culture works, the things that CEOs really should be focused on to help that sales organization create the stories, right? And I'm a firm believer that salespeople need great stories. They need to understand their own story to be able to position the company well. Talk a little bit about how positioning, using the right words is important, and we should be focused on the outcomes of our customers and our customers' customers, not on us, right? And this is something we talk about a lot on the program, and Brent just validates it in a different way. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So Brent, welcome to the podcast. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to have a conversation.
Yeah, Walter, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So I had a couple of questions. We'll talk about the business a little bit, kind of in the same space, but we have different approaches. So I want to learn a little bit about that. But I'd like to ask, when I get somebody who's running a company in the training development space, the revenue space, what do you see being the biggest concerns that CEOs have, or what do you see that they're missing when they look at their sales? What's the disconnect with the sales?
The number one problem, I think, the number one thing CEOs are not paying attention to that they should be paying attention to is the buyer and customer journey. CEOs have to own that. And the reason they have to own it is twofold, is the world has gotten much more complex, right? In terms of the expectation for personalization. Every buyer wants you to talk to them, their role, their goals, their segment. CEO has to own that. They have to own the brand promise. The second thing is our revenue organizations have gotten a lot more complex. Once upon a time, there was sales and customer service, probably 10 years ago, right? There was sales.
Yeah, not that long ago.
Not that long ago. Now you got your demand gen organization, you got your prospectors, you got your sales team, account management team, customer success team, your rev ops team. They all have to be connected to create a seamless buyer and customer journey. They're often disconnected in ways that causes all kinds of friction for the buyer because those teams aren't working well together. They all have their own leaders, multiple reporting lines. The CEO has got to own the fact that you need an integrated go-to-market experience.
And is it fair to say that sometimes they assume the revenue officer, the chief sales person, whatever their title is, because those have gotten a lot more creative than they were 10 years ago. Is it they're assuming that this person has everything under control? Is it that they don't feel comfortable delving into that? What are your thoughts around?
I think it's both of those. I mean, look, good CEOs are good at hiring talent. And so they want to hire talent and enable talent. So that's part of it. I'm just like, I'm going to delegate. And then part of it is, if you haven't grown up in sales, right, you kind of feel like, well, I can't show up to those meetings and add value as the CEO, so I'm not going to show up to those meetings. But what
it really doesn't help the culture, doesn't help the mission, doesn't help the brand, doesn't help the story, right?
It doesn't. I mean, I love to tell the story. There's a company called ETU, which does immersive virtual reality. And they do a best practice, immersive virtual reality for soft skill training, right? Different leadership or diversity and inclusion or what is based in Dublin. They do what I think is a best practice, and there's some others that we've worked with. TrueFit has a retail personalization platform, and others. They have these cross go-to-market meetings that are really just to dive into different elements of the buyer and customer journey. Sometimes maybe on the success motion or the land and expand, or what are we hearing in our first calls. Diving into it just to line the team up on where are we winning in our messaging. The CEO at ETU shows up on those calls. And he's
Wow.
just saying, this is important, guys and gals. I'm here because this
Well,
motion is really important.
if nothing else, that's the message,
Yeah,
that the CEO, he or she's showing up, interested, whether they engage at a high level or they ask questions. It's sending a message to the team that we, need to work well in the sandbox together and not kick sand in each other's faces.
that's right.
Um, and I think that's an interesting observation. That when I ask that question to CEOs, they, I get, they're worried about forecast. They're worried about what's coming out of the output from the revenue, and they don't really understand how their forecast is created. That's an interesting perspective, and it kind of goes into another thought I had around sales culture. And let me set it up this way: I sales culture is part of the company culture in the way I look at it. I think salespeople are different, so we should have a little bit louder kind of meeting. There should be some energy in there. We should have a lot more competitiveness amongst the team, and I equate it to an Italian family's Sunday dinner, right? Where it's loud, there's everybody shouting. Sometimes there's food being tossed, but there's this love and trust there, and and nobody's going to break into that. Like they can talk to each other in a certain way, but nobody from the outside can come in and start picking on another salesperson. But there's that competitiveness for the team to be successful. Um, so, and the CEO can definitely play a part in that. But what I see a problem, I'd love your take on this, is that they come out, a CEO or leadership will come out and talk about these are the things that we're going to do. We're going to build customer service. We're going to really focus on the customer's journey and make sure that we're giving them what they need and providing great service. But then they fail to go and connect the dots for the individuals. Like, what do I need to do as the guy on the shipping dock to really make a difference? What do I need to do as a salesperson, right? What are the things that I should do that I can have a great effect? And even finance and accounting. How does that work? And if we don't tell people what they can do, they sort of just look at it as this nebulous thing. And yeah, it sounds great, but they don't know what to do. Is it? How does that?
Well,
How
two
does
two
that fit?
parts of what you said really land. One is, look, sales is different. And there's a chapter in our book, and I wrote a article on this in Customer Think on 3 revenue cultures, 1 revenue team, right? Where sales I describe as action oriented, focused on putting numbers on the board and story driven.
Mm-hmm.
The marketing folks are more analytical and they speak in flowery language, which is evocative and important, right?
Yeah.
And the
Sure.
success people are sort of more nurturers and customer first. And how do we make it so different cultures? And there is a little bit more rambunctiousness to the sales culture, without a doubt.
It's a good word. I like that word. That's good.
Um,
Rambunctious.
and it should be right. It should be. There's no. We want to compete and we want to win. A lot of ex athletes are just competitive people, right? In whatever sphere. So I think you have to do that. You have to build the cross team mechanisms, and one of the greatest ways to build the cross team mechanisms is honestly just sharing stories across those teams. It's a leveler, and this is where I think CEOs honestly can provide the most value. In addition to just saying I'm here, is just telling their stories about work with customers or customer
Yep.
calls they were on, or how they describe the customer experience to the investors, or which ones they hone in on. Because at the end of the day, your CEO is the ultimate arbiter of your positioning. Um,
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, some people think it's marketing, some people think it's the advertising, but the CEO is one that's responsible for everything. At the end of the day, they got all of it. And you're right. If they can get the leaders of all of those groups together and have a conversation where they just share what's being heard, that sort of cross pollination of ideas and information and data sometimes and intelligence of what's going on can really have those like aha moments for the people that are opposing ideas, that they can like, oh, I didn't realize that that's what's going on in the field. Maybe we should rethink what we're doing, right? And it's communication,
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah,
it?
100%. So what you said, this kind of cross fertilization, 100%, Walter. I think the other thing I would just look, CEOs have to be good storytellers because they have to sell investors and they have to sell shareholders or wherever it is, and
In the
the
media.
media, and using that skill to actually motivate your team. Like, okay, this is an abstract kind of, this is what it means better, client services, right? Is, well, tell a story around it because that's where the rubber hits the road. And this is how, an example of a customer we won back because of the adjustments we're planning on client services. So they should just use the stories as a way of making it more energizing, but also much more practical and specific for their team on what a direction means.
Yeah, to me, it's always about that level of communication. And if the leader can, they should be great at telling stories, like you said, and communicating ideas through stories, and making sure that the vision that they have and the strategies that they've sort of identified are understood and being carried out so that the customer walks away with that feeling. I had a conversation with a gentleman the other day. It made me think about, um, if you're, because he had a CEO talking about, you know, we should be talking to our customers about their problems and about their solutions and the outcomes we can support them with, right? Nobody cares about our features and benefits, right? That's always a challenge with some salespeople. But this CEO has started to have the conversation of, what do we know about our customers' customers?
Hmm.
Does our customer, do we understand what's important for them to deliver? Can we provide any value in how that works? And the story he told was interesting. It was around a non-for-profit. So think about like a cancer researcher that has to go out and do these networking events and fundraise. He's selling, right? But he's a scientist, super smart person, and he can't go out and talk about the biology and the molecular biology and all of the research, the technical research that he's doing. He's got to go out and talk about what they're doing for the kids, what they're doing for the women, the patients, right? What they're delivering, and help that donor understand that you're helping the community, you're helping this part of the community, and it's not so much about what we do. It just, to me, it was like it was one more level in that can, that kind of story can be really powerful inside your organization to really make them think about, it's not just our customer, it's the customer's customer, and then it goes to the community after that. It's
Yeah, yeah,
huge.
100%. What is our customer being held accountable for and to whom?
And what are they trying to do? It can, because if we can add value as a sales organization to our customers that far down the line, we're we're obviously ingrained, we're obviously helping them, we really understand, and they see us as a partner rather than a vendor.
Yep.
And I think that's a big goal for a sales organization. um, and it's just, to me, it's like it's a great way to think about, a non-for-profit really has to do that. And if we could do that in a traditional B2B role, um, how much impact we could really have
Yeah,
as
100%.
an
It's well
organization.
put.
So let's talk a little bit about you and the company, and you've got an interesting background that doesn't necessarily draw a straight line to
Mhm.
sales. And I like to talk about what your ideal client profile is, and how you can really help them, because our audience is wide. We got CEOs, we got sales leaders, we got reps out there, these entrepreneurs. So kind of like help understand what kind of resources you can bring to the
Yeah, great. I
party.
mean, we talk about what we do is go to market and revenue acceleration consulting because our focus, I mean, is really creating that integrated buyer and customer journey and positioning value across the entire buyer and customer journey. And so we work with teams. I mean, we have a series of playbooks, including kind of demand gen and how do you build out your website with the right content. So content strategy
Mhm.
playbooks, prospecting playbooks, sales playbooks, customer success playbooks, and it's all about building value alignment. But then for us, what a playbook means, it's a how-to guide with examples for how do you shift from your product to your buyer value. And our whole thing is it's not about you, it's not about your product, it's not about your successes, it's about why your buyer or customer showed up
Mhm.
and showing them
Mhm.
how you can help them to a more successful future and having plays that in every interaction remind us to go from our product how to our buyer or customer why drives revenue.
We're talking about the outcomes that the company can provide to the customer, and that's always the context that we should be talking about. Nobody cares about how long the company's been around, how many logos we have. They really care about what are you going to be able to
That's
do.
right. I mean,
And that's
do
that's
you help them drive revenue because you capture more customers from the website, right? You convert more buyers to browsers, or do you have a tool that helps with retention, right? But you keep more of your students, or you keep more of your workforce, or are you optimizing a lot of the industrial automation companies we work with? They're optimizing productivity in a manufacturing plant, so you can do more with less spend, or extending our staff reach, right? So either asset or staff utilization, you could change a user experience, right? You can lead to higher, quicker time to insights. What are those? We call them value plays, but what are those outcomes we drive for our buyer that get them excited to talk to us? Not the products and features, but what outcome do the products and features create to build value for your buyer?
and explaining that in the context of the buyer, of your customer, as to how this is really going to help them save time, mitigate risk, and either save or make money. Right? Those are the big money
Those
drivers.
are the big things. And the end of the day, we'll go back to stories. It's all in your current customer stories. If you don't know the answer to those questions, go ask your best customers why they bought from you and why they're still buying from you. What was different after that they didn't have before? And just start to write that down because that's gold, right? Your best customers that have been with you the longest, done the most business with you, the reasons they are with you, the outcomes that you've helped them achieve, that's what you want to capture and sell forward.
It's how you differentiate. It's how you talk about the outcomes that they're really concerned about, and to a large extent, especially early in a conversation, they don't care how the sausage is made.
Mm.
They just want to know that the sausage is going to taste good, and it's safe, right? Especially if it's sausage. But I mean, that to me, that's the thing that I see so many companies, they can't tell their own story.
Yeah.
The sales guys just can't do it, and I think that is in a large part the CEOs, the leadership's responsibility to tee that up, make sure that's available, keep adding to it, and then give that to the salespeople. And if we have competencies and they have skills, they should be able to take those stories and that messaging and positioning, take it to market. And if they're saying the right things and they're talking to the right people, we increase our chances of closing.
Yeah,
business.
an expanding business, right?
Yeah, wider and deeper.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
wallet
you're
share.
absolutely, we're 100% aligned. The CEO ultimately has to own that and can model it by not just the high level initiatives, but hey, let me tell a story about how that could translate for one of our customers, and building that habit of showing, hey, this is about what we're helping our customers achieve or their customers achieve. It's not about our product is such a critical mindset shift. There's two industry stats, and I can't remember which is from Gartner and which is from Forrester, but one says, 80% of salespeople think they need to share all of their product information to have a complete conversation. And
Right.
75% of buyers only want to have conversations with sales and marketing teams that understand their specific business issues and their specific business challenges. So we want a product dump and they want personalization to their business situation.
And it's literally ass backwards. And what salespeople, sales organizations don't realize is the basic questions that were needed. Like think of a car dealership, and even just in the 70s and 80s, you needed the salesman in the dealership to tell you about the car, the engine, whatever that, how many cup holders there were, whatever was important to you, they held the keys to the information. And the buyers today are so much more informed and so much farther down that journey, as you said before, and getting that alignment so we meet them in the right spot, ask the right questions to give ourselves credibility and to really dig into what their real challenges are. And we can figure that out, then we should be able to figure out if we can help them
Yeah, 100%.
with. And that's what sales is about, is it's not so much putting a product in somebody, it's about trying to help them solve a problem or find a problem that they didn't realize they had, and solving that for them.
Yep.
It's, to me, it's just helping, and you got to believe that you're doing that to
Yeah,
start.
when it's done well, it is a service profession, right? Our goal is to make our buyers and customers more successful. That's point one,
and
two, one,
if
two, and three. Uh,
and if we don't approach it like that, we sound like the proverbial, clip on tie, short sleeve shirt guy with the, in the used car lot. And that it's a terrible moniker that we have to deal with, but it's our job to elevate.
yep, it's a good word, elevate. I
And it's
like
our
it. You asked how my background. I'm a PhD social scientist. I spent 10 years doing qualitative research, and
Mhm.
there's two parts.
for some pretty
What's that?
some pretty big for some pretty big
Yeah,
institutions.
at Stanford and Rand. That was, where I began my professional career. And at the end of the day, I loved research because I love pattern recognition, but I just couldn't, I didn't like the financial trajectory. And so I did what academics call going to the dark side. And I went to work with Kaplan in their higher education group, leveraging the academic background to be in one of their divisions selling adult degree programs. Um, and I then had a series of revenue leadership roles, four pretty quick successes, and then started Winalytics as a consultancy. And I think the reason I arrived doing what I do is I was a math history guy in college. And so I love both the
Math history.
stories, math and history. I love
Okay.
both the stories and
And
I love the kind of simple analytics that come in math. And at the end of the day, good go to market strategy is just telling stories about value after pattern recognizing. So that process of iteration you described, I mean, it's just recognizing buyer by type, what are they leaning into? And then rinse and repeat a story about value. So I was good at storytelling. I was good at pattern recognition. And that's what go to market strategy is. We have to tell the right stories to the right buyers and be able to version that and figure out by role and by use case and by segment what matters most to them.
so who's your ideal client? What's the right persona? Like what size organization does? Like, who's a good target? Because if we got people out here listening, and you said a bunch of things that might resonate with somebody, we'll have all of your contact information in the show notes. But I mean, who's the person that you really like? That's my guy or
Yeah,
my
I would
gal
say
to look at.
there's two growth companies in kind of the $3 to $20 million range that are really trying to optimize revenue by building out a better go-to-market experience. And often we're working there with CEOs, CMOs, and the sales leader. Those kind of,
Together.
some of those people pick up quicker, but it's, the idea that we need to get better value alignment to grow quicker. We need to personalize value. The other one, we
Okay.
do enterprise work, and usually it's a chief sales officer that is sponsoring us there. And usually in an enterprise situation, the connection between sales and marketing is like not very agile. And so the chief sales officer,
You're being kind.
what's that?
Said you're being
I'm
kind.
being kind. So the chief sales officers that say, hey, I need a partner on positioning to make my sales positioning a lot better, are the ones that kind of lean in. So we think of our secret sauce as making a unique market position sales executable.
So you give them the words and help them tell the stories in a repeatable fashion.
Exactly. And then build
And
team
those are
skills
the
to do that.
and those are the things that, like, when you're coaching somebody and there's a challenge, they're not their win rate is not where it should be, or they're not having success moving things through. Those are what you look at. What are you saying? How are you saying it? And are you saying it to the right people at the right time? And that's what you help them. And the positioning piece is critical.
Yeah, sales
If we don't get the
positioning
right,
is a under recognized need, right? We teach all the tactical managing the sales process, but usually the deficit when you don't have good pipeline velocity is you haven't landed on value. You haven't got the
yep,
buyer to confirm something they care enough about to motivate, their team internally and spend money. And we often say, look, buying is unnatural because I'm going to have to do, as a buyer, I'm going to have to do something different, and I'm going to pay for the privilege of doing that
and usually pay more than the status
and pay
quo.
more than the status quo. So that means to motivate somebody to do that, to pay more, right? To do something different and bring their team along, you got to really anchor on something they value a lot. Something we talk about, a buyer's success statement, is if they were to tell you in 6 months you're working together, what's that more successful future for them? What would they say?
Mm-hmm.
What would make them a hero to their
And
boss? Like, what's the more successful future that's going to motivate them to put in the work now to get through the sales process with you?
so if you've got a room of sales professionals, and you're asked that question, you get a bunch of blank stares back, right? Where they're not really sure how to answer that question
Yeah,
because
often
they've
they're
never.
not, and we'll say this very simple audit technique, and I'll give you two, is look at your follow-up email and how many times do you recap what your buyer said about value, right?
Hmm.
The typical follow-up email, you've seen it, is, hey, thanks for the time today.
Right.
Here's all the products we talked about. Just two sentences on, let's go back to the industrial automation example. You shared that Parsable is a client we've worked with. You saw how automating some of your standard operating maintenance procedures could help your team resolve more maintenance problems without having to go to the shop floor. Something as simple as that. You said the product would provide you this kind of value. Great. Now talk about the elements of the product that help, but always start with what's their why for the next conversation. Because it's rarely to just get on and
Yep.
see a deeper demo. It's there's something they're trying to
Right.
solve.
We have to demonstrate that we've listened and that we've paid attention to those real problems, and that there's a pathway to keep talking,
Yep.
right? We don't differentiate, and part of what you were saying I call urgency. If we don't create that urgency that this is a priority, this is something that, if something doesn't get corrected, there's bad things that might happen, whatever that means. Um, so that's and those are things that salespeople struggle to figure out on their own. And frankly, their job is to tell the story that maybe somebody else crafted and put it. It's sheet music that they play with their voice, right? I mean, they're playing their instrument, and you know, Miles Davis and Dizzy Gillespie can play the same notes, and you'll know who's playing what because they sound wildly different. So we have to give them the music to play and make sure that they're delivering it to the right people.
I think you're right about that. It's better when it's there's sales enablement or revenue enablement or marketing is building out some of these content, but I don't want to let salespeople off the hook here. I will tell a story about a sales individual, Samir Husani, who was he was he's trained as an industrial engineer, went into sales account management to make more money. He was a son of Egyptian immigrants, right? He wanted to do well, and he wasn't doing that well, and he was doing okay. And I remember just saying to him about having more, we call them authentic conversations. So one day he showed up for a plant that had a pump they needed for a cooling system. Normally, after that, he would just go through talk about more pumps and more valves and more filters and more control systems because his manager always said, don't miss a product opportunity. And this time we coached him to just say, hey, what else are you working on? And the plant manager was started calling him my success partner. And he spent 40 minutes talking about how that pump connected to 3 business problems he was being held accountable for. Planned maintenance, product line uptimes, and one other. And so he would get in the habit of, hey, what else are you working on? And what else could we work on together that would make you more successful? Why are you here today?
Great question.
So it doesn't, customer story is hard to generate on your own, but just simple questioning techniques. And then, as people would answer his question, they'd say, oh, well, I'm working on this. He'd say, so tell me more. What have you tried around that? What's working and what's not working? Has a goal been set against that? What kind of improvement? So these simple things, just to get simple non-technical questions to get our buyers to tell us what gets them really excited. Because here, Walter, is the difference. When we talk about our product, do you know what that sounds like to our buyers?
Sort of like the Peanuts cartoon.
Wah,
right?
wah, 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 wah. When you have in an email a sentence that says, I heard you say this is what you're working on, do you know what that sounds like to our buyers?
You listen to me.
Hallelujah. Because you are one of 8 salespeople that actually listened to me and took the time to listen, ask good questions, actively listen, and share back what we might work together on.
And it's simply like being curious.
Yeah.
As a salesperson, right? To be like, why do you do it that way? Okay. And then, is that working? No, it's not working. Oh, then why do you keep doing it that way? Right? It's almost like having a conversation with a friend who's got a problem and they've called you and said they need some advice, but you're curious about why they're doing things and what else is happening, what might be causing that. If you just bring that basic curiosity and the ability to keep your mouth shut and ask a question.
Yep.
It's so much more fun, frankly.
Yep. And here's the thing I would say to your sales or sales leaders that are listening and your CEOs who are listening is and this is going to sound a little strange, but I'll explain it. Give your sales team permission to be curious. Because we had a decade of training, right? It kicked off in lots of reasons, but so 2010s was a decade of so-called major innovation in sales innovation and strategy, right? Up until 2011, we had 7 major methodologies. It took 60 years to develop. And then from 2011 to 2019, starting with Challenger, boom, explosion. Had 20 by the end of it. But all of them were focused on the buyer, I mean, the seller's
Hmm.
action, the seller's process, the seller being in control of the sale, teach, tailor, take control, command of the sale. That's what they all focused on. So what
Yep.
sellers have learned is I got to drive this. I'm in charge. I need to have a close plan. I need to position all the elements of my products. You need to say, forget all that. That's not helping you. Performance dropped radically during this so called period of innovation. What you need to do is ask 3 or 4 simple questions in every interaction about why your buyer is talking to them and what's not working for them. That's your mission number 1, 2, and 3. Get to a buyer or customer success statement.
And then be able to ask those questions and then follow up and dig in and make sure that you're really understanding and what that's really causing, which helps the the customer or prospect, realize that this is a bigger issue and that they do need to fix it, and that there might that as a salesperson might have the solution. That's some really insightful. And I'm going to take back what I said. Your background's interesting, but there is a dot that those dots connect because you really
Yeah.
saw what seeing those patterns happening and being able to salespeople are pretty good at adding things up when there's a dollar sign in front of them, but or a
The way to think
percentage.
about it.
But regular math is kind of elude us from time to
Mm.
time. But especially when it's on a commission check, they're pretty tight with the math.
Mm.
So I like the land of the question I usually ask: if you have any relationship with cigars, as the podcast is called, Sales and Cigars.
Yeah, look, I've always loved cigars. I don't smoke them very often. I've always landed cigars, but I will share a not well known fact about me. You know who Branch Rickey is? Yeah, so
Yep.
he was my great grandfather. Yeah,
Oh,
so
really?
my probably strongest association with cigars is pictures of him chomping on a cigar.
And there's a few of
Yeah,
those.
there's quite a few of
Um,
those because, as you may know, his backstory. I mean, he was a what at the time they called the fundamentalist, Christian. He was a very committed person of faith, and he sort of promised his mother. I mean, he didn't have any sort of bad habits, so to speak. Is a little bit boring in that way. He didn't ever go to the park on Sundays, so cigar smoking was his bad habit because everybody's got to have one.
hmm, interesting. That's an interesting tidbit. Thanks for sharing that. Great story. So we'll have some. We'll have your contact info and things in the show notes, your website, LinkedIn. What's the best way of all of those things? What's the best way for somebody to reach out to you if they're interested in having a further
Yeah, I
conversation?
mean, they're welcome to reach out on LinkedIn. A lot of people have done that after shows, and then, we can dialogue and happy to go to an email conversation if there's something deeper people want to explore. So reach out to me on LinkedIn is great. The other thing I would just encourage people to do, if you go to the website Authenticity Wins, it actually goes to our book website, which is part of our main website. They can download for free the first 2 chapters of our book and might get some insights or thoughts from that.
Awesome. That's a great little tidbit. All right, great. Again, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time out. Some really thoughtful ideas and answers. So
Yeah, Walter, really
thank you.
enjoyed the conversation. Great set of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.